Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfilment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio, supporting Empower Women. And today we're talking about success, what it is, and also how we can awaken and fulfill our own choices in life. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Didi Ananda Rashmika, a yogic nun and social activist with a passion for women's development. Founder of the movement Mujer Despierta, which means women awake in English. Previously, not only did Didi have a successful career in the mathematics of finance in the City of London, but she was also a sportswoman who played in her country's national team. Didi's worked in Europe, the Middle East, Far East Asia, and is now based in Colombia. Welcome to the program, Didi.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Okay, can I start with the question that I ask everybody, which is about your career? However, yours is much more diverse and far-reaching than most. So tell me, how did you start in your career in finance in the city, which obviously you were very successful at that, as well as being a high-level sportswoman and representing your country?
I was a student of studying applied mathematics at my university. We have the opportunity to do a final project abroad, either at the university or at a company. And I had the opportunity to do my final project at a company in the City of London, a consultancy company, which was a great opportunity to be in London. Of all places. Never lived in a big city before. And alongside all of that, since I was in high school, I was involved in my sports more and more, and it was going better than I'd imagined. Yeah. So I ended up in a national badminton team, which was actually not something I thought was that special at that time.
Really?
Yeah.
I think if you're very good at something, you don't take it as being something really difficult or really incredible, because for you can do it so well. So it's different view on it.
Exactly.
What led you to doing that? I mean, particularly finance and the city and things like that. Was it something that you'd always been interested in, or was it more by chance that you really went into finance?
Well, my master's, my MSc being in applied mathematics, my interest was more in mathematics than in finance necessarily, although before studying mathematics I'd always had an interest in economics, accountancy, finance, but being a mathematician at heart more, the opportunity to work for this consultancy company was what kind of brought the finance back onto my path, which was, well, in a way it's coincidence. And I think the attraction to the city was very much a challenge of this kind of world that seemed, how can I say, representative of success, of something glamorous, all the three-piece suits and everything like this. Yes. So I remember feeling that as a challenge, like I can enter that world.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of talk, particularly about how difficult it is for women to succeed in the city, as well as certain other sectors. So you must have started there, about 20 years ago, something like that?
Yep.
Was it difficult for women to have a career in finance then? And do you think that's changed over the last 10 or 15 years?
I think within the world of finance, there were different areas in which women were represented in a different way. Being on the technical side of things, the quants team, the financial engineers, in my company I was the only woman. These are the people with masters and PhDs in mathematics and physics. Yeah. So that's usually where more men are active.
Yes.
There are more women in the consultancy side, even in the banking, I think, and of course in many auxiliary roles in the company, like in marketing and in the receptionist, of course. Yeah. But for the technical side of things, surely it was much more male dominated than even the other areas. I certainly hope it has changed over time, and I think it has. Although having left that world, I must say I'm not really informed about it anymore.
And did you find much discrimination against you as a woman, or they were just interested in you being good at what you did?
I wished it was the latter.
Okay.
I wished I could say, yes, it was just my work that counted, but no, unfortunately not.
Okay.
There was, I think, the discrimination in that kind of work environment. There are some blatant things that you just learn to put up with.
Yeah.
You're still first seen as a woman instead of as a colleague.
Yes.
Being the odd one out. And I must say that I noticed in my colleagues sometimes difficulty in how to deal with me, because before it was all men among each other in our little team. Because within the big company with all the financial people, within my team of, say, 7 people, they would always have certain jokes among themselves, which now seem to be inappropriate with my presence.
Yeah.
And they didn't really quite know how to deal with that. So I think there's those are the kind of things that need to change as well. It's a certain kind of culture.
Yes.
And of course, you've got the usual response of when a courier walks into the company, doesn't see the receptionist at her desk, walks into the office floor, sees a woman, goes to her to get the signature. Because obviously she must be the receptionist.
Yeah, yeah.
And those are things that I must say at that time I wasn't taking them very seriously, it was just part of what you put up with. And I guess at that young age I wasn't quite sure what to do about it either.
Yeah, yeah. I know I had a situation similar to that, but a lot more recently. Right? I was in a networking event where it was all leaders or owners of companies that were there, and I was there as the owner of a company, the director of a company.
Yeah.
However, I was the only woman there, and I had, I think, 3 men out of 20 coming over to me saying, "Where do we find the coffee?"
Exactly.
I was like, "I don't know. When you find it, bring me one too." And they were like, "What?" I said, "Yes, I'm actually here as the head of a company as well." And they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." But it just proves exactly the point. But anyway, so
no, it's good. You can rebuff that though with humor, so it's an awakening for them too. Because what I found is that many men, good men, are just not aware of certain of these things, of these biases.
Yes.
Mind you, I was not aware of many of them until I faced them.
Yes, I know, it's strange. It's until you're actually in that situation, you just don't realize how conditioned you are to tradition and upbringing and peer pressure and things like that. And then it suddenly hits you in the face and you're like, "My God, I can't believe it." But anyway, I know you were very successful, okay? And you seem to have had what many women and men would consider to be a dream career. But you decided to change. So what was it that you found out, discovered? What gave you the inspiration, the drive, the push to do that? I mean, tell us more about it, because you made a really drastic change. You went from one extreme to the other, which I find absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of us would like to do it, or even just take 1 or 2 steps along the same path. So tell us more.
Well, something before I finished my high school, something happened in my personal life, in my family life, that until then had been perfect, I would say, which made me question things about life. I won't go into much detail, but everything that I believed to be true, like when you do good to others, good things will happen to you, and certain people you can trust without questioning and everything like this. All of that from one day to the other lost its validity. And but being 17 and just before my final exams, my external life continued as usual. I continued studying, I continued my sports, went to university, then moved to London. But these questions about life continued somehow to to chatter in my mind.
Yeah.
Chatter is not the right word, but from time to time they would come up.
Yes.
Because when your life view is suddenly changed and you start to wonder, well, what is the point of life? Why am I here?
Yes.
What am I doing anyway? But yes, I was being successful, and I had not only the successful career with a lot of money coming up in the future, I also had my sports career, I had my family, I had my friends, I had boyfriend, I had my health, I had basically pretty much the perfect life most people would want.
Yeah.
But with these questions that I could no longer ignore, I had to face that something was missing or something was not congruent in what I was doing. As a student, I had a certain kind of idealism about changing the world, even as a kid, actually. Yeah. And I realized I'd been moving far away from those. But, when everything is going fine and I'm enjoying my studies, I love the maths. I had a small faculty I had a lot of activities outside my studies, like, when everything is really good.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's said the good is the enemy of the best.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah.
But then when I was working in London, where I was away from certain comforting situations that I had in the Netherlands, life was very much work during the day, drink at night.
Yes.
And even though I wasn't drinking alcohol, I drank an awful lot of water those years. I started to question one specific night. I remember, those familiar with London, they would know Richmond is a very beautiful place within London. So after drinking indoors in the winter, in the summer, we would go to Richmond and drink outside.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting on the train back and I was thinking, is this life? We drink inside and then we drink outside. I mean, like, is that the only change we're going to have? And I all those questions about life became very strong again.
Yeah.
And shortly after, I wanted to do something else in my life in London. I was trying to get back into the sports. I wrote to many of the university associations and came across the Meditation Society, something that I'd had an interest in since my life questions came up.
Right.
I started with them, and that was such a shift in my inner life that I could no longer ignore it. And for a long time, I thought I will combine this career in finance with my spiritual path. I will be the one to bring these two worlds together.
Yeah.
You have to say that when you're in your early 20s, you can be extremely idealistic.
Yes.
And I wanted to do that, and I continued with finance. My company offered me to do a PhD. I continued with a PhD to the University of Bath, and I started my yoga meditation practices.
Yeah.
Until there was a point that I thought, I have moved so far away from my ideals. I need to change something. When you ask something to the universe, you will get an answer.
Yes.
Not necessarily in the way you liked it.
Yes.
After I'd been questioning myself, I need to change something. I need to change something. My boss, one of my supervisors told me, I'm not supposed to tell you, but you're going to lose your job in a few months because the recession had taken in. Of course, I was the youngest. They were paying for my PhD, which wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the company.
Yes.
So I was going to be the first one to be laid off.
Yeah.
So I wanted to change something, and here everything was changing for me.
Yes.
Then I had my very nice professor in Bath making efforts to find me funding, which eventually he succeeded. The University of Bath would finance me. And I had a few months in which I had nothing. And in those few months, I deepened my practices. I went for a 7-week training, and I could just no longer ignore the inner call to do something really according to my heart. Yeah. I tried. I went back. I went to the university. I started there, but to face another few years doing a PhD on the mathematics of finance, me and my computer, I could no longer ignore that I wanted to change the world.
Yeah, yeah. So where did you go from there? Because, I mean, that's such a radical step, really. I can understand exactly what you're saying, and Richmond and things like that, and the contrast. I understand perfectly. I lived in Richmond, actually. It was wonderful. It's definitely it's a materialistic lifestyle, even though it's a beautiful one. So to take that radical step,
Yeah.
Even if you're feeling that you've got to follow your calling,
Yeah.
how can you get that? What drove you really to move from that and to take the leap into spirituality and social activism? And also tell us not just that, but the doubts, the fears, because I'm sure a lot of people are very interested, but are like, oh my God, it's such a big step.
Well, to start with that last part, when I eventually had taken that decision, I was surprised or stunned to find many people around me saying, I wished I could do the same.
Oh, really?
Not necessarily jump into spirituality, but as in, I wished I could follow what I really want to do. And one of my colleagues at work, she was a consultant, she joined after me.
Mm-hmm.
She was Italian. She actually returned to Italy to become a swimming teacher, is what she'd always wanted to do.
Yes.
So actually one person did.
Yeah.
But others told me, I wished I could, because they felt not really fulfilled in their lives, but not necessarily either willing to make the sacrifice.
Yes.
Because, well, financially, forget about it. Leaving the city jobs. So that was many felt they wished they could do the same, but were not maybe didn't want to take the sacrifice, or their fears were too great. Because yes, there are fears, and there is an awful lot of judgment you will get from other people. I was considered crazy.
Yeah.
By, I would say 99.9% of the people I spoke to. Even by people in my yoga community, because it's like, well, you've got this career, you've got this money that's going to come to you, and you're choosing that. It's like, look, it was hard. It was hard in that sense, because very, very few people supported me in that choice.
Oh, really?
My family, was not supportive, let's say.
Freaked out, I take it.
Yeah, I try to be a bit careful with my words, but yes, freaked out. A quote that I remember writing to my parents in a letter. This was the era when email was still very new. I wrote them a letter on paper, and I remember writing them that the ship in a port is safe, but that's not what a ship is made for. And obviously, the fact that I remember 20 years later is that this quote really made a lot of impression on me.
Yes.
Because following the safe path in life doesn't guarantee success. And something in my family's history has very clear examples of that. And even though it seems to be tempting, because we feel that if we choose something safe, less risk, we may actually, not be exposed to our fears and everything like this. But I came to the conclusion that when I do what my heart really tells me to do, I may or may not succeed, but I won't have the regrets later.
Yeah. No.
And choosing that so-called risky path doesn't guarantee failure either. It doesn't mean I'm going to fail, because what is that failing? That failing is when I didn't do what I really wanted to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Is failing is what? Being laid off of a job? No, there are so many other opportunities. Quitting my PhD. I mean, I was the first person in my family to go to university. So obviously I was the first person to start a PhD, and until now nobody in my family has a PhD, and I quit. And the thing is, I never regretted it, because the satisfaction I feel from doing what I really want to do, even though it's not easy and it's not socially recognized many times, especially in the beginning. As in, after some years when you're happy, people say, she's happy, it's okay then.
Yes.
But in the beginning, you don't have anything to prove. I mean, anything to show as proof of that.
Yeah.
And the satisfaction that you get from following your heart, from doing what I really want to do, without the external recognition, is something that gave me so much more energy than doing a PhD, in my case, doing a PhD in finance. And to be honest, nobody knows what it means to do a PhD in mathematics or finance if they don't know what's the topic.
Yes.
If they're not into it, I mean.
Yeah.
But it's socially admired somehow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
PhD.
this takes me on to one of my sort of pet topics that I get very, very obsessive about. Personally, I believe that many of us have got stuck in like a never-ending loop of what success should be, as in should be in quotes.
Yeah.
And it's not our own personal choice, but we've unconsciously accepted this. And normally it's an old, traditional, and mostly male view of success. And we haven't really questioned it. We haven't really looked any further. I know I did that from when I was young, and my family, well, particularly my father, he was open-minded, so he didn't try to push me anywhere. But even so, I sort of, the whole school, the whole family, the friends, the circle, everyone around us, they've got your sort of idea of success and you just go along with it. I think from your story, maybe you had a similar type of feeling, experience that, this was the normal view of success. But do you think that that's the same today for many people? I mean, I know what I think, but I'm interested to hear what you think. And do you think that we can and should move beyond this and open up our own vision and our own choices?
Absolutely, we should. You see, in order to be, obviously, in order to be happy, we need to do what makes us happy and not follow someone else's idea of success, which many times is what we internalized, as you say, as the idea of success. When I went to the City of London, I thought that was also success.
Yes.
And having a career, having a PhD, and then entering the banking sector, etc., etc. Because to come back to your previous question, what steps did I take? When I decided that this is what I really wanted to do, I informed my professor. I quit my PhD. I was a volunteer for some time. Then I went to training, etc., etc. In that time, when I was informing people of my choice already taken, I could see exactly this. I could see in people's eyes. I was telling them, like, well, I quit my PhD and I'm becoming a volunteer. And I could see the disappointment in their eyes. And I could see myself drop on their ranking of important people or people they value in a certain way, I could see I was now at the bottom because you're a volunteer. What's that? So this idea of success is very much, our general idea of success is very much career-based. If you have a certain career, and a certain career that has status in a society, which comes with money, then you are successful. Having worked in a city, and I'm sure your experience with similar people is the same, many people in those positions are not even happy. They have the external success, but they fail the internal success. Imagine if you have the internal success, meaning your inner strength, your inner happiness, your ability to face your fears, your ability to overcome inner obstacles, your doubts, your self-esteem is high. If you have that inner success, outer success is much easier to attain.
Yeah, I agree, totally. And I've seen so many people in those situations that are absolutely miserable. It's almost like the fire goes out. You can see when they start their career and they're all full of energy and passion and interest, and slowly the fire just disappears.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
Okay, moving on to women, because obviously this is a program particularly for women, women's careers, women's choices, women's independence, women's equality. You're particularly supportive of women's empowerment. And you've worked, as I said at the beginning, you've worked in several different areas of the globe. So Europe, Middle East, Far East, Asia. What differences did you see in those areas about women's empowerment?
The idea, well, this is my vision, how I've been thinking back of it.
Mm-hmm.
In Europe, the idea of empowerment is we shall do the same as men.
Yeah.
Based on the idea like we can do the same stuff. In the Middle East, the women are considered different. There is a respect for the women in a certain way in their roles as mothers. At the same time, there's a restriction on how much freedom they have to go out and do what they want to do, which is obviously a big downside. But I could really sense there a certain respect of women as mothers.
Yes.
No? And in Far East Asia, a different flavor altogether. I was based in Taiwan for 7 years, where there is very strong traditions, which are currently changing very fast as well. But in a traditional way, in the traditional roles, limits a woman to a certain extent. And now there's a lot of change because women are educated, they are independent, they can earn their own livelihood.
Yes.
And they are very much empowered in that way, breaking free from that old traditional role. Yet I feel the risk there is what we're talking about earlier, that this importance of the career takes over in terms of success.
Yes. Yeah. And so are there any key points that you found in these countries that you think we can learn from each other? So the different cultures, the different areas can learn from each other and use to improve our own situation, wherever we are, whatever part of the globe we're in.
The freedom to choose and to do what you want to do. For example, there was never a question whether I could study mathematics in university as a girl.
Yeah.
Even though we're the minority there. That for me is a very important aspect. However, I felt, thinking back about it, is there's sometimes not enough, how can I say this? Not enough respect or recognition, rather, of women's speciality, of women's being different. For example, working in an office with mostly guys, I could survive. I did manage to survive. I can do it. But I had to let go of a certain part of me, a certain femininity of me, in order to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real loss. It's a real loss for the workplace, and it's certainly a loss in my personal life.
Yeah.
So that in other cultures, that may be more valued. But if in other cultures that is valued, yet there is a certain restriction on women's freedom, that is something that needs to be implemented there more.
Yeah. Okay. And so now you're in Colombia and you have launched Mujer Despierta, which aimed to empower women in South and Central America so that they can reach their all-round potential, but as you say, still being their full feminine self. So
exactly.
Tell us more about this and what it does and how it helps, because it sounds very, very interesting.
The movement is aimed to, first of all, raise awareness, raise the consciousness of both women and men about the differences and the differences that need to be respected. Because one thing is recognizing that men and women are different, that each have their own kind of qualities, which are complementary, not competition.
Yeah.
And both need to be valued, to be respected, so that together we can move forward. Yeah. What we see in societies that are very career-based, all these so-called masculine qualities, which women to have to some extent as well, of goal-oriented independence, this determination to reach what they want to reach, right? Which is very much valued in the economic, career-driven society. Without the certain amount of empathy, compassion, sense of cooperation, which is much more feminine quality, we cannot move on as a society together.
Yeah.
Like one side is much more valued because of the career, because of the careers, because of the economy. But we're seeing a world that's not successful in providing for everybody, in which everybody can be happy, fulfill themselves. We see wars, poverty, greed, right?
Yes.
So a lot more of the feminine is necessary to establish a balance in the world.
Yeah.
A mother is doing an extremely important job if she's raising good children. It's not being valued in an economy-driven society.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So we need to establish more of the feminine or express more of the feminine in the world. So a lot of it is about raising the awareness that we have those differences. Those differences need to be valued, need to be respected. And we need all those differences to create a better world.
Yeah.
For that, we need to be aware of the programming we've received. Yes. Through our upbringing in the family, in the school, in religion. There are very limiting ideas of what our roles and ambitions as women can be.
Yes.
A lot of it has to do with if we see examples of women who are rather silent instead of speaking their opinions. Still, we have situations where women speak less than men do.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I ask women here, what do you feel apart from the certain obvious things as violence against women, but apart from that, what do you feel is important, an important struggle for women, or what do you feel is an obstacle or a problem? Many women told me low self-esteem, and a lot of that comes from not being respected for their femininity.
Yes. Yeah. Do you have any other examples that you can give us about really how to develop our potential and stay feminine?
It's a process of unlearning some of our programming.
Yeah. Yes.
To gain enough confidence to speak up in situations where that programming is continued.
Mm-hmm.
So it's increasing self-esteem, increasing self-confidence, alongside with freeing ourselves of limiting programming or limiting education we've received.
Yeah.
And with that, then next is to help others free themselves of that programming. Because to change a culture means to changing education. It also means, which is in line with a lot of topics on your radio program, in your line of work, is also economic self-sufficiency.
Yes.
Because as long as women rely on men for their maintenance, financial support, they cannot leave situations that are not helping them.
Yes.
In worst cases, domestic violence, etc.